Chelsey Luger is a writer and wellness advocate originally from North Dakota, an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa and a descendant of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. She got her undergraduate degree at Dartmouth College, concentrating on comparative histories of global Indigenous cultures, and later earned an MS in digital media at Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism. She is the co-founder of Well for Culture. Her writing has appeared in The Atlantic, Huffington Post, Yes Magazine, and other outlets. Thosh Collins is a photographer, board member for the Native Wellness Institute, and co-founder of Well for Culture. He is on Acamel O'odham, Seneca, Cayuga, and Osage, born and raised on the Salt River Reservation. He serves on the Salt River Pima Maricopa Land Board and remains politically and culturally active within his community. They live in Arizona and have 2 daughters. Incidentally, I was born in Arizona and I have 2 daughters. As I was preparing for tonight, I was reading the introduction about the countless ways to interpret the medicine wheel, and I realized how truly welcoming this introduction was. The authors wrote, and I quote, "Like most Indigenous knowledge, it is not a rigid concept." And then it struck me when they introduced us very early on to a Lakota medicine man, Frank Fools Crow, and quote him as saying, "Anyone who is willing to live the life I have led can do the things I do." With such warm outreach to us as readers, we are certain to learn much together tonight. And thankfully, we will have that time for Q&A at the end. So here we go, RJ Julia, Wesley and RJ Julia, and BookHampton. We are so grateful to have Chelsey Luger and Thosh Collins here in conversation today. I'm going to let them get started.
Thank you so much, Kathy. That was such a lovely introduction. We just appreciate your warmth and welcoming energy so much. And we're so grateful to everybody at RJ Julia for their interest in our book and for welcoming us to this virtual event with your store. We're very excited to connect with everybody who is here today. So thank you all so much.
Yeah, I also just want to echo those comments there. Thank you for that very nice introduction, and we're just it's just so good to hear when we interpret the book in the way that we hoped people would. So thank you for sharing that insight there, and for that introduction, and thank you for welcoming us here to this event, and thank you to those of you that decided to log on and spend your evening here with us this next hour or so. As we talk about our book, The 7 Circles, Indigenous Teachings for Living Well.
Mm-hmm. So just to further introduce myself a little bit, Kathy pretty much said it all, but we're coming to you from our home in Tempe, Arizona. We dropped our kids off a little bit later today so that we could pick them up a little bit later. Normally they would be running around here in our living room. But as she mentioned, I was born and raised in North Dakota. So my heritage is that I'm Anishinaabe on my mom's side of the family, and I'm Lakota on my dad's side of the family. But it's been an honor to live and work here in Acamel O'odham territory with my husband for the last 8 years or so. And we've been doing wellness work for about 10 years. And the getting to this point of being able to write and share a book on our passion, our work, the force that drives us to get out of bed every morning, which is Indigenous wellness, is just the honor of our lives. And we truly hope that the love and the passion that we have for our work really translates and comes through from the page.
Yeah, and as Chelsey had said, and it was already mentioned, that together we started what we were calling an Indigenous wellness initiative called Well for Culture. And we started brainstorming that around 2013. At the time, Chelsey was living in New York City, and I had just moved back a couple years before that from Los Angeles back to my home community, the reservation. Both of us sort of had this very similar life journey where we were raised in our communities, but we went outside of our communities in our young adulthood to go to school and to live in the city, and really, I guess, to look for a different experience from what we were raised with growing up on our community. So I had just got back to my community around that time, and I was working with the Native Wellness Institute and just got on the board. Native Wellness Institute is a nonprofit organization who's based out of Portland, Oregon, and they've been doing Indigenous wellness work with Native communities for the past 20 years and plus. And so I've had the honor of being able to shadow some of the trainers there who go into various Native communities, who are invited to Native communities. They do wellness in the workplace, they do community healing gatherings, and really just facilitating healing spaces for Indigenous people through the teachings of our ancestors. And so that was something that I was very fortunate to be a part of. But when Chelsey and I got together to create Well for Culture, we wanted to create something that would also bring into the entire Indigenous wellness movement conversation about our original Indigenous modalities of movement, and bringing in our foodways, which was something we were both very passionate about as young people who were into fitness and into living that sort of healthy lifestyle. But we started to get together and put our brains together and started to find out a way, how can we share on social media with the Native community that's present about connecting the dots between our health and wellness and healing from historic trauma, intergenerational grief through the ways of our ancestral people, but also utilizing what we're learning in our modern modalities of fitness. And how do these all work together? Why is it important to be well so you can so we can be a part of our Indigenous culture continuing for the next generation and so forth? So we started to share this on social media, and at the time in 2014 or so, there was nobody talking about that. And so we saw that there was I guess something to be filled, and after some years of traveling to Native communities in the United States and to traveling to First Nations community in Canada, we formulated 7 circles. And because we thought, how can we create a more comprehensive format, a model that's rooted in our ancestral teachings? So we thought about it very briefly one time before we were doing a workshop in one community. And, we said, well, okay, let's just organize it by the various aspects of pre-colonial Indigenous culture that allowed our people in that time to thrive in health, to thrive in the climates that they did. And we saw that it was our connection to the land that was inherent. We did it together, so there's community. We had ceremony, we had reverence for all things, and we had a process of doing that. Ceremony is important for our overall well-being. And our homes were sacred, and we had various ways of moving, whether it be everyday use, and engaging in sport, engaging in dance, and we had reverence for the nighttime and sleep and recovery. That we have a lot of sacred teachings about that. And of course, we had foodways. And so we thought about that, right? 7 circles, and we did trainings on this for the next few years, and finally the opportunity came, and this is all what our book is about.
Yes. So do you want to share any of our slideshow, or do you want to just jump right into excerpts and stuff?
I think jumping it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So Thosh did a great overview of what the 7 circles concept is and where it comes from. And of course, you're going to learn a lot more about that in the book. And I just want to really emphasize the interconnectedness and the interconnection. So it was interesting because in organizing and in outlining our book before we started to write it, it was a very clear structure. We would do an introduction, we would do 1 chapter per circle. Within each chapter, we share each 1 or 2 stories from our personal lives. And we also have a shared chunk of writing where it's kind of just talking about the circle in general. But I would say, and then of course there's a conclusion, but even though that was such a clear structure, I would say the hardest part was choosing the placement of these personal stories that we have that you'll see throughout. Because in fact, you'll find that, for example, the story that fits into my movement chapter could also very easily have fit into the community chapter, or the story that Thosh shares about community could have easily fit into the land chapter or the ceremony chapter. So it's so as you read this, just know that if you're noticing, well, this seems like it's related to not just community, but also to land, then you're absolutely right. And those are the connections that we hope you draw in your own personal life as well. We hope that because of the fact that health and wellness is so often the only emphasis is on food and fitness, diet and exercise, diet and exercise. We hope that this expanded wellness worldview will help you to not only invite more wellness practices into your life, but to acknowledge you're already doing so many things for your wellness that you might not even have thought of before as a wellness practice. So today, the first excerpt that I want to share with you comes from the Sacred Space chapter. So Sacred Space is one of my favorite circles of wellness. I guess I can't really choose a favorite or put them on a hierarchy at all. But I really enjoy talking about this chapter because I think that it's something that so many of us are so passionate about from an artistic perspective, from an aesthetic perspective, or even just from the perspective of being mothers and caretakers and parents. And we love to take care of our homes. And this is an aspect of Indigenous culture that I find is very little known. So in general, a lot of people don't know a lot about Native American culture or its diversity or a lot of these different wellness aspects, but people are particularly unfamiliar with pre-colonial philosophies about homekeeping. And so, it is kind of an obscure topic, but it's our ancestors have profound teachings when it comes to homekeeping, and the ways that they kept their spaces was so intentional and so inspiring. And the research that went into this chapter was a lot of fun. And so anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share the beginning of the Sacred Space chapter. So the subject title is Curating Sacred Homes. The Lakota lived in masterpiece teepees that followed the buffalo herds across the Great Plains, while the O'odham carved out cool desert homes from cactus rib and adobe clay. The Mandan and Hidatsa collaborated with the hills of their home country to build warm and inviting earth lodges, and the Haudenosaunee lived, worked, and prayed in grand timber longhouses. The Inuit made warm and inviting igloos of ice, while the Ojibwe built birch bark wigwam with balsam and cedar floors to purify and insulate the air. Indigenous people have always taken pride in keeping beautiful, functional, and sustainable homes. Our ancestors understood the ways that their living spaces and environment impacted their well-being. Today, we must revitalize the teaching that a home is an extension of our well-being. We should once again begin to treat our homes as sacred spaces. Too often we think of the places where we live, work, and hang out as objects or unliving buildings that do not affect our health. But the opposite is true. We sleep, cook, eat, raise babies, and spend countless hours under our own roofs. So we should have reverence for our homes and their rooms. When we put love and intention into creating safe and serene environments, those spaces can become family sanctuaries. A sacred home is thoughtfully designed and arranged in a way that facilitates all other aspects of our total well-being. This is how our ancestors viewed the spaces they occupied, and this is how we can view our homes, schools, and workplaces today. Expanding the concept of space, we can also consider our personal care processes and our digital spaces as extensions of our environment that influence our health, well-being, and sense of balance. So that's just a preview of what you'll get in the Sacred Space chapter. And hopefully what it becomes is not this idea that I have to keep a perfect home or I'm not well, or I have to keep a perfect home or I'm not perfectly imbalanced. That's absolutely not it. What you'll find in the book is a recognition that something as simple as making my bed is something that we know that evidence has shown will make us feel better. And we can now view it as an option for self-care, just as we understand exercise to be an option for self-care, or cooking and eating a healthy meal to be an option for self-care. So again, it's just this expansion of our wellness worldview that you'll find throughout the book.
And when we talk about sacred space too, we also refer to like not just our home, but like our office, schools, and even places like that we transport in, like our vehicles. And, you know, sort of the, I guess, one of the main teachings that's very obvious probably is keeping our home clutter free if possible, and keeping our home clean. Those are the obvious, but things such as bringing natural light into the home, this is what we've heard a lot from our knowledge keepers growing up, who were people who were not, they weren't science people, they were people who embodied the original pre-colonial indigenous ideas about health and wellness and what that was for us. And that was something that's pretty ubiquitous across various indigenous nations, is that the sunlight is very sacred. The sunlight is special. And that's why in our home, we always have the sunlight. We try to utilize as much natural light in here in our homes before we start turning on lights and exposing ourselves to the various, you know, cool tones and exposing ourselves to electronic devices that emit blue light. You know, we try to minimize that there, and just try to resync up our circadian rhythm with these sun and moon cycles, and just to get on on a healthy regimen. And there's a lot of evidence coming out for that. So we share a little bit about that in the book. And again, that's kind of where you see indigenous knowledge start to really come out, and there's goes hand in hand with a lot of new evidence that's coming out in the science world right now as well. So all of our ways, we're very practical as Native people. We write about that in there. We have a great quote in there about our practices, our spiritual practices are exactly that. They're practical, and there's no mystery in any of that. And the science is catching up and is able to verify some of these things here as well. So I think that maybe some readers will be pleased when they read some of the teachings that we have already been following as a Native people for thousands of years.
Do you want to share? Can we share some photos and let you talk about some pictures? So we're just going to go ahead and share our screen here. As Thosh gets this ready to go, I'll just share that. I mean, obviously, you know, from the beginning of when Thosh and I met and started working together, we have had a nice balance in that. I'm a writer, he's a photographer, so I've always done a lot of the writing and stuff that's on our website, our blogs, our social media content, and Thosh has always been our leader in a visual sense. And he is going to share just a few of the photos that you will find in the book. And so in addition to, of course, sharing our stories and finding that balance of sharing our personal stories, but also sharing the science and the ancestral knowledge behind each circle, it was a very fun and challenging process to curate the photos that you will see. Thosh's photography dates back to when he was doing film photography in high school, and his visual education began even earlier than that, because his dad used to shoot film photography and would always take pictures in the 80s while he and his family were on hunting expeditions and just outdoor recreation and all kinds of stuff. So selecting from Thosh's body of work was really, really a challenging and fun task. But I think that you'll find a very beautiful selection between these pages. And from my perspective, I remember knowing Thosh's photography before I knew him as an individual. And it was so empowering and exciting for me to see these images of our people that were positive, that were inspirational, that were not at all manufactured or fake. He truly has built good relationships with thousands of people from hundreds of tribal nations over the 20 years that he's been doing photography. And it really shows.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I think they're okay. I don't think they're anything special, but I'm glad that people enjoy them. For me, photography is really just a tool to help relay our message now. So a lot of what we're sharing in here is just quick snapshots of really just nice people and nice things, I think, you know. But thanks, love, for those comments. And here's a slide that has a photo that you'll see in, I believe, the land chapter. And we have this great quote right here by Dr. A.C. Chuck Ross, which is one of Chelsey's cultural leaders in her respective community, and that she had learned from in her upbringing. And he says, "Watch how you walk. You are walking on your mother." And I want to share the first short paragraph with this that's associated with, or that's in the land chapter. And we have that quote associated with this as well. But it says, "Cultural shift toward a subsistence worldview. Indigenous people everywhere share a love and respect for the land. We have never lost this sacred connection. We have never forgotten how Mother Earth provides. Because we understand how much we rely on her, we respect her accordingly. Many view the land as a resource to be used, exploited, owned, and occupied. Indigenous people know that the land is a living entity to have a relationship of respect and reciprocity with. She is a life giver, guardian, the root of all creation, the heart of the universe, and the essence of our very being. When she suffers, so do we. The health of the land is a direct reflection of the health of the people." And so we wanted to share that in here. This is a photo right here that I shot, I believe it's about 10 years ago now, of my brother Amson and my friend Martin. And our friend Martin was visiting in town from Alaska, or originally from Alaska, but they went out, and it was one summer, and my brother was taking them out doing some bow fishing, and that's something that my dad used to do when we were growing up as well. And this is on the reservation in Salt River, where I'm from, the Arnalkamir, the Salt River people. And our reservation is located right outside of the city of Scottsdale. So in the recent years, the Phoenix metropolitan area has kind of grown around us. And so I grew up on the reservation, but we very much interacted with the city on a daily basis. But we were able to maintain a lot of our original cultural practices. We were able to maintain our cultural privacy. And we still talk our languages, we still follow our ceremonies and sing our songs. And at the same time, we also participate in dominant society to a degree, to an extent. And so we're very fortunate to have this beautiful river run through our community. That's what we're known for. This river right here is our lifeline for our people, and really the lifeline to the residents of the Phoenix metropolitan area, because it does provide water for the entire valley. But originally they called this Chudakakimir, the Green River, and the Spaniards came along and they became known as the Verde River. And so this is just one of the many beautiful places on the reservation where we like to go out and spend a lot of time. I was raised coming to the river for various gatherings, social gatherings, ceremonial gatherings, and around the river there is where we do things like forage and hunt, and we also just take our daughters out there to go for walks. So I wanted to just share this photo here with that.
So let's share another slide. So how about we go to can you go to the community? So community is another aspect of wellness that I think tends to be excluded from the wellness conversation. But of course, we know that connection is everything. Connection can help heal us when we are feeling depressed, when we are feeling unmotivated, when we need support in whatever hardship comes our way in life. And so we can't forget to talk about the importance of community, connection, kinship, and family, and healthy relationships. Those are all concepts that are going to be found within the community chapter. And it starts with a quote by Ella Deloria, who says, she's a Dakota anthropologist who worked kind of in that transitional phase when reservations were in their early days, and she was seeing our people transition from our pre-colonial lifestyles to our contemporary lifestyles. And she says, the ultimate aim of life, stripped of accessories, was quite simple for her people. One must obey kinship rules. One must be a good relative. So she, again, she's a Dakota person who was born and raised within her community, but also educated as an anthropologist. And so needless to say, very much the expert on Dakota values. And she holds this understanding of community and being a good relative in that high of esteem, that it's like basically the number one thing that she says are people valued. So to be a good relative, I just love that concept, and it's so helpful for me in my life when I'm feeling a little bit lost or a little bit off balance. And I just remember, you know, it's not just about me, but who am I to others? And so I'll just go ahead and start. And I just want to read a short excerpt from the kinship and connection section. It says, and this is a true story. At a powwow in Southern California, where hundreds of dancers from dozens of nations came to compete, we watched as a young boy, maybe 12 years old, won his first grass dancing contest. Over the microphone, the announcer proclaimed his victory. He smiled big as he received his cash prize of several $100s from the judges. A new set of dancers entered the arena, and the next event started. But we kept our eyes on the boy and watched him walk to the sidelines where the drum group sat. He found the crew who had sung as he danced. He placed his entire envelope of earnings on the center of their big drum and shook hands with each singer. He left his reward, but came away with something greater. He showed the world that his family had taught him to be generous. So within the community chapter, you'll find all of these different community teachings that come from our different tribal nations that we were raised in, but also that come from all over Indian country. And again, it's just such a foundational part of health and well-being that we were just so excited to be able to finally share this in a wellness worldview and to help people find ways to rekindle their connections in life. And maybe Thosh can share a little more about that photo.
Yeah, the photo here is one of our recent elders from our inner circle, our community, who he's been passed now for a couple of years, but Charles Tailfeathers, he was a Blackfoot and Cree man, and that's his wife, Nancy, and they've been together for several decades, and this photo was taken around 2013. And I wanted to just, we put this in there because we just love how they playfully show affection even in their age, and they really demonstrate love and companionship and community, and we feel that the strong communities are made up of strong families, and those strong families are made up of people who are living by good ways, people who are living by teachings of care and love, honesty, bravery, compassion, respect, and you know, following a certain set of teachings and holding themselves accountable for that. And Charles Tailfeathers, that's the kind of man he was, and Nancy, that's the kind of woman that she is. And so we wanted to just share that. We just thought that was a really fun, playful image, and it's very inspirational for all of us. And we see that as something to aspire as young people that have been married for only a few years. But I see that we're coming to the end, I believe, in the moment. I just wanted to also kind of wrap up and share just for the ending. I guess we can also share a little bit more about, in the circles, we created the 7 circles, not as pillars or bullet points, but as circles, because, and we understand inherently within our worldviews, Native people, that everything is cyclical, and that all of these various aspects of our life ways play a role. So there's no hierarchy. They all play a very important role in determining our spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional health. So you see that right here, what I just mentioned, that physical component, emotional, mental, spiritual, those are hardly components themselves, but those are inextricably connected. So when we are doing things in various activities associated with each of these circles, we are experiencing further connection between those states of being that make up who we are as human beings. So there's you at the center, and on the outside is family, and then beyond that is your community, and then beyond that is the world at large. So this is really a way that depicts our view of health and wellness as Indigenous people, that we don't see it compartmentalized, such as in behavioral health or exercise science. We don't see these
in that way. We don't see ourselves as very separate from the natural world, from the animal nations. We see ourselves as a part of that, and therefore we don't have words in our languages for nature, because we are a part of that. It is all around us. So it's only us as human beings that in our minds separated ourselves from the natural world, and that's sort of the dominant cultural view. And we share all this too because we feel that we as Native people have something to offer to dominant society, and especially in the way that America is right now and other Western developed countries. We felt maybe this book would be accepted at this time, and that people might be interested in another perspective about health and wellness, and how to live in a good way of life. So we do share in here how everybody from all walks of life can be inspired and implement not these very specific practices that we do, but understand them in the same way and find ways to implement them. So we give lots of great examples, I feel, for all people to find out how they could live in a good way.
Yeah. So I think RJ, Julia, and Kathy, if there are any questions yet, we're more than happy to start answering them.
Most definitely. Thank you so much. And we just want to mention, Chelsey, we can hear you very clearly. Thosh, we may need you a little closer to the microphone as well. So just making sure we can hear you loud and clear. And we also want to thank you so much, first of all, because your encouragement, thank you for telling us that what we are doing in such a positive way as we look to maybe what else that we can add. You mentioned your many influences. Are there any particular influences that you can talk about? Perhaps some other books that you read as you prepared to write this book, or maybe some other materials?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And Thosh, should we just unplug the mics and just use the computer? Is that better? Or I can just pass my mic to you when you're ready to talk.
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, always a tech issue.
The battery died.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it was really a mix of teachings that we had learned just from simply growing up in our community, from elders at ceremonies, or from our parents and grandparents. A lot of that sort of oral tradition knowledge is woven in throughout. Some of it we were able to very specifically cite, but some of it is just inextricably sort of interwoven throughout the pages and throughout our stories. So that's one piece of the knowledge. And I think that that's such an important point because, you know, even back when we were pitching and conceptualizing the book, we felt that there was such a need for an Indigenous wellness perspective that comes from people who are actually raised in the communities. Because the only other books that sort of had touched on Indigenous spiritual practices in that sort of context some of them tended to be written by people who didn't come from or didn't grow up in our communities. And so that was really important to us. And I really believe that, you know, along with our publishing company, Harper One, we were able to really fill in this huge gap that was missing in the wellness conversation. So we feel really proud that this is an authentic representation of our communities. And we talk a lot about the fact that there always is the pressure of accountability when you are sort of put yourself in that position as a public facing Indigenous person. We feel grateful that our communities are always holding us accountable and holding one another accountable, because it makes everybody's work better and it makes everybody treat these subjects with the attention and the care and sort of the sacred respect that they deserve. And so all of the, no small part of this book was taken lightly, as far as understanding that our elders and our families are expecting us to represent our communities in a certain way. So that's sort of a long answer for just one small part of where the knowledge came from in this book. But another part of the knowledge came from academic resources and science articles and kind of anywhere else where you would find health and wellness information. And then a third big piece of the knowledge came from tons and tons of books that were written by Indigenous authors that are not at all about wellness per se, but where for years we've been reading these books and kind of bookmarking and writing down in our notebooks and our moleskin, like little quotes that stood out to us from Indigenous authors from all matter of subjects that maybe a small piece of it happened to fit into sort of our vision of wellness. So that's where it all comes from.
Very good. Thank you. We like long answers. That's fine. That's why we're all here. So we have a long question, a very helpful question, though. So bear with me and I will ask it. This is a question for both Chelsey and Thosh. So we'll go with you first, Thosh. It says, have you always had balanced daily schedules evolving around wellness and work? Or was there a time when it was imbalanced and you decided to change it? If so, please share with us how you disciplined yourself to incorporate healthy habits and more productivity for the day.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, we can certainly spend a lot of time talking on that for sure. But in short, I think that we, with our upbringings growing up, there was many different aspects of that where it was still rooted in very much in our original teachings. And so that's what we consider, wellness and healthy lifestyles. And so growing up in that, and as we get into our young adulthood, we both share in the book about our challenges of going into the city and not dealing with stress in the same way, and adopting, recreational use of substance and alcohol from our influences from, those and outside of our culture. We write about that, but we also write about the grief and trauma that we have experienced as young people, having family members and community members who are at great risk of things such as addiction and depression, suicide and accidental death. And as Native people, because of the historic trauma in our communities or in our history, we have experienced that greatly. And so this is why our book is a contribution to that growing movement. So this movement has really been happening already. So there's a lot of people that probably are not familiar with that, of course, but within the Native American and First Nations community in Canada and the United States, the movement has been happening. And the book is really just our contribution to that. So we certainly experienced those, but it's hard to, I guess, pinpoint any one specific point in time where we decided, oh, I need to wake up and make changes. I think both of our journeys have been sort of organically evolving in the past 10 years. I've had milestones in my 20s and in my mid 30s and then getting into my age now. But certainly we have experienced imbalance when we were younger and when we had veered off the path that was set before us from our families and elders. And we had to realize that we needed to get back onto a path here and develop the healthier lifestyle for sure. So, that certainly we're still in that phase because we recognize that with healing and wellness, there's no finish line. We just get to a point where we do have an abundance of tools and we can take on obstacles, much better than we had before. But we know that we are still in our own healing journeys. But that's a great question for sure. So thanks for asking that.
Yeah, and my answer, I would just say that I'm very often not in balance when it comes to work and, different aspects of, movement, food, all that stuff. It seems like on any given day, I tend to feel like maybe 2 or 3 of my circles are like doing pretty good. And then I tend to feel like I'm pretty well neglecting like maybe 4 or so of the other circles. And then it just kind of ebbs and flows. And then I tend to sort of rotate through them because there really is only so much we can do in one day. Like, for example, today, I didn't make any time to move my body or exercise because it was so on the forefront of my mind that I needed to clean up after being out of town for a few days and my house was a disaster. So, but that made me feel great. Like I cleaned my car, I cleaned my bedroom, I did some laundry, you know, and that was my wellness practice for the day. So, so for me, it's just a constant returning to, and we talk about that in the introduction. We show examples of how from one day or one phase of life to the next, your 7 circles are going to ebb and flow and shift. And it's not about constantly having them all perfectly balanced. It's about having that model so that you can say, you can just visualize it and you can say, okay, what am I missing today? Aha, I need to get better sleep. Okay, I'm going to focus on that circle today. And then you just do your best every day of your life.
Thank you. Another question is that you said there was a clear structure to the book, but it was hard to choose the placement of your stories. Were there surprises that came up that you can share with us in other ways in terms of the writing of your book?
The biggest hurdle to overcome was just the fact that a month before our contract officially began, I had given birth to our second baby, and it was also pandemic. So no childcare until the very, very end of our writing process is when we finally got our 3-year-old into a daycare. And so full days at home were simply just being parents. Mm-hmm. And as every other parent experienced during the pandemic as well, we are certainly not alone in that. And I mean, you can't sit and write when you have a 3-year-old and a newborn, or a 2.5-year-old and a newborn. And so the hurdle for me was adjusting to those office hours of 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. And in our culture, we believe in co-sleeping. So it was me and the newborn in one bedroom, Thosh and the toddler in the other room. And so I just had to balance like being in this bed and trying to be quiet and typing away and like rolling over to breastfeed her every so often whenever she needed it. And then doing it all over again for almost a year. That was the hurdle. That was the challenge. That was unexpected. But looking back, it just makes it all the more sort of fulfilling of an accomplishment. I can't believe that we did it. I don't know that I would be able to do it again, but and you'll read in the conclusion that we really credit our daughters for keeping us in this space of mind where we were, because we constantly had them by our side as we were writing this book. It was like, we're writing this from a place of love. We're writing this from a place of, this is not just about us. This is for the future generations. And we're not going to get into the weeds of like competing with, you know, the other health and wellness people out there. Like, we're really just rooting this in love for our daughters and for the future generations.
Very good. Thank you for that. I think that this builds on the idea of real world, which you talk about in the book. Are there any further thoughts about your readers learning to develop real world strength? I mean,
Yeah, you can talk about that a little bit. I think from the movement chapter, like what we mean by that term, real world strength.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In the movement chapter, we share, of course, a lot of history about how Indigenous sport has always been really prevalent, and that we share that message for our own people as well, that may be struggling to understand how physical movement is critical for overall health and wellness today. We share that history, and hoping that everyone can be inspired by that. But we also talk about more technical aspects of movement, and we share in there something that is pretty prominent within functional movement and functional exercise, a model that's called 7 basic movements. Happens to just be 7. I don't know, we didn't land on that number or choose it, but these are just things that fall into that, I guess. But the 7 basic movements, which is pushing, pulling, lunging, squatting, a hip hinge, a rotation, and then a gait, your walk or your run or your sprint. And we share and try to give readers a little bit of direction about understanding that as a formula to strengthen your body strengthen your body from not just muscular, but also just a functional, total body functional strength and endurance and conditioning, to be applied in everyday life. So it's generally referred to as real world strength, and in that when we do movement, we could do, or if we're strengthening our bodies, we could consider the sort of lifestyle that we live here. And we share a little a chart in there showing how the various movements, the various 7 basic movements are applied in all of the real world settings. And in our case, we use scenarios from our native culture, such as you see one there is Chelsey doing archery. You see a man there bending over to pick up teepee pole. You see another man stretching for lacrosse, another man putting a teepee pole up, pushing it above his head. And we see our daughter there squatting down, and she's playing in the dirt one of our days while we were out planting in our family field. So we just share that real world strength and try to introduce the concept of tailoring your movement practice to aid you in your everyday lifestyle.
Mhm. Yeah, and one thing that you're going to find comes up so much in the book is just parenting, and how much our kids have taught us the importance of wellness and have sort of helped us to reframe it. And I always tell people I never would have respected or understood the physical demands that come with parenting until I've been through it. And a lot of caregivers and aunts and uncles and grandparents and others can relate to that as well. And so I never would have thought before about my training in the gym is going to impact, my ability to like pick both kids up and carry them if one of them is having a tantrum or something. But like, that's the kind of stuff that comes up every day. And that's what kind of some of the things that we mean by real world strength.
And that is real world. Okay, another question. This is to each of you again. What is each of your favorite chapters, and what did you feel while writing them?
Tough question. I think that my favorite chapters are the introduction and the movement chapter, because I do think that the Indigenous perspective on movement is so comprehensive and so beautiful. And we were able to achieve a really good balance of contemporary and ancestral knowledge woven throughout that chapter, and just stories that you'll find so fascinating. Like, for example, how Phil Jackson, the coach of the Chicago Bulls in the 90s, relied on Lakota spiritual worldview to make that team what it was, which is the greatest basketball team in the history of the world. I mean, I think things like that, a lot of people don't know. And then we were also able to just share some of my particular favorite personal wellness stories in the movement chapter. And then the introduction chapter was certainly among the most challenging to write as well, because like the pressure of the introduction. But again, I think we did a good job of making it pretty comprehensive and weaving in some fun stories. But
yeah, that would be a hard one for me too, because I see all of these circles and chapters as equal, and they're all just equally amazing to me. The way I understand, the way I see it, they're all integral. But if I had to really think about what I was excited for other people to read about, I think it would be what we write about in the ceremony chapter. And we define ceremony. We show how people can adopt ritual and ceremony on a daily basis without appropriating Indigenous culture, but but implementing it based on the same structure and based on the same ideology, which is, I think, a really appropriate way of going about that. We also share about some of the scientific evidence and what happens in terms of like brain chemistry and neurology during ceremonial time, and we cite some of the work from our friend Dr. Michael Yellowbird. And so I guess I would say I'm really excited for people to read that.
Very good. And as it comes up to the end of our session together, I will get ready for our last question. And this comes from our audience, so they set us up perfectly to wrap up. But it's interesting that you mentioned the introduction, Chelsey, again, because it feels like you've welcomed us throughout this program, and you welcomed us in the introduction. And I appreciate that. You also left us such valuable advice from this program one must be a good relative. I think that's something we can all think about quite a bit. So here to our last question from the reader. Even though your first book just came out and the work that went into this, what are your plans to continue these teachings through other outlets or possibly a second book?
Mhm. Well, that would be a dream come true. And we have expressed numerous times to our agent, Jenny, that we hope to have a lifelong relationship with her, and that we've just had such a great experience throughout the entire writing process. And certainly we do have visions for potentially more books. I mean, and we're open to any other opportunities that come our way. And we're just kind of looking forward to continuing to build connection. And we're so, above all, just grateful and honored to have the opportunity to introduce the world to our people and our culture through this lens of wellness, because it is a lens through which very few people know the Indigenous world. But I think that so many people will be very inspired by. So I'm very happy to hear that that's a question that's coming up. And yeah, we hope to just keep continuing the work in whatever capacity.
Yeah, we certainly hope and foresee more books in our future for sure. And I think one of our big goals is for people to read the book, is to see more people implement this model in their personal life, in their family, school settings, community settings. And we hope that more people who work in clinical settings that are doing natural medicine or holistic or functional medicine, or working in health and human services, might adapt this model in their care, in their practice, because that's really, what we created this for. We hope people in public health look at this and take it into consideration. And we've done some work in that capacity with various Native communities, and we hope that it moves beyond that, and that it'll be a source for people to be able to utilize in their work.
Very good. Well, we appreciate you spending your time here with us tonight. And on behalf of all the attendees that were here, we really want to thank you, Chelsey and Thosh. And for those who are with us, please also consider purchasing your copy of The Seven Circles from RJ Julia, Wesley and RJ Julia, or BookHampton. And the links are being sent to you via the chat box. Please find them there. And remember that we do have signed book plates that are available while those supplies last. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining RJ Julia, Wesley and RJ Julia, and BookHampton tonight. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.